Welcome to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld. My guest today, Scott Zimmer. Scott, how are you?
Hey, great. Good to be here with you.
It's funny, I've known about you for quite a long time, and we've been maybe sort of circling around each other for a while, and we finally got a chance to talk, and I'm so happy to do so. So those of you who don't know Scott, you probably have heard of some of the things he's done. Some of the really high profile things you've done, Scott, are basically being the person behind some pretty significant design agency acquisitions. I know that you were very involved in Capital One acquiring AdaptivePath. I know that was true for Verizon acquiring Moment. There was another one as well, right?
Yeah, there's a few others out there, but those two stand out. I agree, and
Yeah,
a big hello to both of those teams who I love dearly and was proud to be associated with them. They're amazing people.
they really are. I certainly know a lot of the folks from AdaptivePath and Moment. So hello to you all, alumni. But so this was when these things happened a decade ago, give or take. It was really, I think, seen as like a majorly significant couple of events in terms of UX having made it in a new way, of being seen as having value in new ways. But there's more to the story than this, and I think that story kind of connects nicely with your story, your career arc. Why don't you do a little bit of a background that you will do better than I will? How did you get into this position where you were behind such large organizations making such major decisions?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had anyone ask it to me in that way, but I was an artist as a kid and was super creative and have always just been bold enough to try things. So I started my career at Disney. I was bold enough to think I had a right to work there, and they all laughed at me until I worked my way into a role in the marketing department and eventually the Imagineering department. And that really shaped my worldview from there forward. But I had studied business instead of anything relating to design because I was inspired by entrepreneurship. So little did I know that later in my career, as I migrated towards innovation and what was new, I would fall in love with design, and the designers would say, "Hey, this guy actually gets us, even though
Mm,
he's a business guy." And that's really what kind of transpired at Capital One, especially. That's a special company. That's a company that is always in learning mode. I love to say, their CEO and their leadership team are the most humble I've ever met. They're always taking the stance of if they don't know the right answer, they're willing to learn. And I was in a position to lean into advocating for design, and with a business background, I could speak the language of the business leaders and the at that company data analysts. They were all like, "Hey, he's one of us, and if he's advocating for design in language we understand, then that makes sense to us." And so we leaned in hard, and they were in the right mode to believe that building up an organization that cared deeply about customer problems and solving for them, that building up that kind of an organization would matter to their future. And so that led to Adaptive Path and led to kind of my own discovery that my DNA is design, and my education and language is business, and that ended up being a pretty fun combination for quite a while.
well, you've just hit on a topic that's one of my favorite. And if anyone has listened to at least a couple episodes of this podcast, hopefully some of you have, I'm really interested in shared language, or the Rosetta Stones that help us communicate across different domains. And this ability to talk business and talk design and product and data is critical. I wonder if you feel like Well, I mean, is that the missing link for a lot of people who are kind of finding themselves in leadership roles where they need to bridge? I mean, how much of it is really understanding the work in each of these domains versus simply being able to get the people who do the work to communicate?
Yeah. I do think it's a huge bridge for design leadership roles. But believe it or not, I don't advocate that design leaders go out and get an MBA. I really think for senior leaders in design and research and innovation, the biggest thing they need to be able to speak the language of the business is what they should be best at, which is empathy.
Hmm.
So if a design leader is advocating for only design for design's sake and not empathizing with the fact that the business either delivers or doesn't deliver on business objectives, then they end up, not being well received. But if a design leader can come into a room and say, "Hey, I know and understand what you're trying to accomplish or what we're trying to accomplish as a business, and here's how the special talents on the design and research organization can feed that and can take us to another level." Now, now you're bridging it all. And I don't think it takes a knowledge of accounting, and I don't think it takes an MBA. I think it takes the ability to learn what the business priorities are and empathize with how the business leaders feel with all that weight on their shoulders.
Well, I feel like people in our general design world are typically fairly empathetic. They're good at learning specific domains. They kind of get that they have to, and yet they don't always succeed. And I wonder if a lot of that has to do with their ability to not only do that bridging themselves, but understand if they're doing it in the right place, in the right kind of setting. So you mentioned Capital One as an organization that had a certain culture. It was a learning organization. There's some markers for you there, and I imagine the other organizations you've worked with. If you were talking to someone who's fairly new to design leadership or even design management, what are the markers you would recommend they look for in their workplace to know
Hmm.
whether they even have a half a chance to do that bridging?
Yeah, well, humility of leadership is, I would put it at the top. And we all love to love growth mindset and talk about growth mindset, but it really starts with people being open to doing things in a new way. And a lot of times you find that companies that are fighting for growth might be open to doing things in a new way. And in my experience, companies who have been on top for a long time often are not fighting to do things in a new way. And those are the cultures where you often find people saying things like, "That's not how we do it here."
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that's a big marker is, a culture that's looking to grow and move in new directions versus a culture that's very proud of where they are presently and ready to assimilate you into their way of working. Um, Especially if it's a kind of company where senior leadership has been in place for 30 plus years. That's a point of pride for them, but it's a challenge for somebody who's advocating for a new way of doing things, like a senior design leader might.
One marker that you may actually be able to see from outside the organization, which could be useful if you're thinking of taking a job in that organization, is the how long the leadership's been there. Are there other signs that you might look for that may be visible even outside the organization?
Well, relative to success as a design and research organization, it's either something that you'll hope exists already, or you'll hope there's an opportunity to create. But the way decisions are made. So
Mm-hmm.
if decisions are made by business leaders consulting technology, and then the entire decision is made, and then everyone else in the discussion can hear about the decision and execute, um, then that's a tradition that can be really challenging to overcome. And a lot of designers are dealing with that today, and a lot of designers have decided not to fight it. This is the way the role is. This is the way the culture I work in operates. But if there's an openness to evolve it and an openness to help, the business understand that those who build would build better if they could lean on the brains of those who can design and research to inform the build, then you end up with that kind of that magic triangle of all three roles working in harmony. And that's the most important thing for organizations is that they have an openness or a level of respect for having design involved in the primary decision versus the execution of the decision.
Well, sounds like humility leads to harmony, and you're making me think of something I heard recently from. Well, I was looking at colleges with my son in Boston not long ago, and someone contrasted Harvard and MIT students. MIT students, they said, are the ones who are like whatever room they're in, they don't assume they're the smartest. They want to learn from everyone in the room. And of
Mm.
course, the Harvard students figure they are the smartest in the room, and they don't really care what anyone else thinks. Now, granted, this is from an MIT person, so it's a bit biased, but
There's
yeah,
there's your marker. If you can get a sense for an organization's bias on one end of that spectrum or the other, obviously you want to you want to pick the learning.
now,
Yeah.
in what you were saying a moment ago, I think you were also talking about how decisions get made, and that leads me to wonder about the decision making process and how centralized it is. So I want to lean into that a little bit, but it's time for a quick break, everyone. You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. We're talking with Scott Zimmer. We'll be right back. Guess what's coming up? The 9th DesignOps Summit, taking place virtually September 10th and 11th. If you are not just a design ops pro, but a research operations person, if you're interested in content operations, product operations, this 2-day conference has so much for you. It's centered on 8 meaty case studies about what people are doing in design operations, really cutting edge stuff, best practices. But we're also going to have 2 fantastic panels and featured speakers, Doug Powell and Alni Figueroa. And of course, no Rosenfeld conference is complete without a bunch of really interesting workshops. Come check it out. We want you there. You're going to want to be there. The 2025 DesignOps Summit taking place virtually September 10th and 11th. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review. Scott, we were talking a little bit before the break about, well, certainly some of the work you've done to bring design into large organizations through acquisitions, of course. Now, I think if I understand it, what you were trying to do was to really kind of, not, almost bring in like a massive infusion of really smart design and researchers, but you also had to have like the right infrastructure to incorporate them. And it sounds like
Yeah.
you couldn't like distribute them right away. You had to have a pretty centralized model. Is that true? And did it stay that way? What's the story from
Yeah.
acquisition to playing it out for a few years at least?
Step one was always centralizing design and research into one team. And in some cases, the rest of the organization didn't understand why that was necessary, but um, I would empathize and my team would empathize and we would work with people until they understood. It's a funny thing on that front, Lou. You wouldn't have the legal team dispersed across the organization reporting up to engineering as attorneys because they were supporting that department. And the
Oh,
and the
I'm
simple
sorry. That's
reason,
just a really ugly picture.
right?
go
The,
go on.
it's a visceral example that I love to use. One of the reasons you wouldn't do it is because you need them to do their job and not be influenced by the team. Another reason is if a set of attorneys are reporting to a leader in engineering or business or whatever who doesn't understand their career field, how are they going to give performance reviews? How are they going to help them evolve in their careers, et cetera? So there are so many, departments that we all consider like, of course, that's a department at a giant company. But somehow design is one of those that is most often dispersed everywhere. And one of the reasons maybe it's most often dispersed everywhere is because it's newer. It's shocking that we're still saying that it's new because it's been decades now. But different teams would say we've really got to have designers, and there's no central organization, so we're just going to hire five of them, and they're going to report to me. Um, and so when I would come into any of the last stops in my career there, Capital One, Verizon, and Truist, there would typically be designers across the entire organization who would reach out to me and ask to be rescued and say, "Hey, we're a little outpost over here, reporting up to HR or reporting up to, the Python engineering team or whatever it was." Um, and bringing them into a single culture totally repositions the careers of those employees, right? Now all of a sudden the person they're reporting to understands them and can mentor them. Now they can have performance reviews that are judging what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Capital One's performance reviews, I don't think they'd mind us saying because they were just such a great company at adapting, but we were hiring designers who were being asked to take math tests in order to get hired into Capital One because Capital One's culture was so analyst centric. But once we got the heft of having a centralized design team, and we could stand up and say, hey, actually, there's a lot of other great things to judge inbound designers and researchers on other than their math test score. Um, that's one example, but changing performance reviews, changing leadership and development, all the stuff kind of comes forward. So that big step, and especially at Capital One, if we hadn't done those things, if we hadn't partnered with the Stanford D School to build a culture outside of design that respected design thinking and human-centered design as a method, then the acquisition of AdaptivePath never would have worked.
Hmm.
They would have met us and said, heck no, I don't care how much money you think you have, we're not coming. It's not going to work. But one of our most proud kind of moments was hearing from them. They decided yes, and Jesse James Garrett, I think, was famously in maybe Wired magazine saying we finally found a corporate team who gets it.
Mm.
Uh, and that's not a credit to me. That's a credit to the broader culture, I think, at Capital One for creating space for experts, to come in and do their job. And so we had to kind of prepare that in advance of the acquisition. So it's almost a misconception that the acquisition of AdaptivePath or later at Verizon of Moment, created the design team. We were close to 150 at Capital One when we added AdaptivePath to the mix. Now, adding AdaptivePath to the mix, they're legendary for a reason. We brought in so many wonderful senior leaders and positioned them to guide the rest of the team, positioned them to change the hearts and minds of leaders across the organization. So that was where it really worked. Um, but yeah, centralizing is critical. And if any one of the members of the audience out there are working at a company that doesn't have centralized design yet, I hope you can raise a hand and drive that change or work with your senior leader to drive that change because it makes all the difference in the world. And if you need any help, you're welcome to ping me offline, and I'm happy to share more of what I know and what I learned.
Awesome. Well, okay, so there's a benefit of centralized design is you have uh, design has leadership that can advocate, that can do things like change the types of evaluations that are done, work on career architecture with designers. That's all great, but I mean, do you feel that a centralized way of working, like we are all the design team or org, and we are maybe parts of other teams on a project basis, but we're all part of one org is really the sort of end destination, or do you see like as an organization matures and the broader organization becomes more literate in design and its value that can change, that designers can be part of decentralized teams.
I I'm really convinced that interdisciplinary teams are the winning teams. But if each of those disciplines has their own org, then that org can nurture and produce the strongest players in that discipline. So back to our example of legal, if there's a member of the legal team, on the strategy team who's coming up with the next big thing for a company, they're happy that that legal person reports up to legal.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that sense, everyone plays, a double role. But I firmly believe from seeing so many examples in my career that the best orientation is to work with like-minded people in your field and then be a part of teams that have diverse backgrounds.
Do you think it's a completely fair comparison? And I'll probably not only belie my ignorance about the legal field, but maybe even about the design field. I think of the legal field as one that has rigid controls, not only in terms of how its practitioners are accredited or certified, but also in terms of the vocabulary. Getting back to that term, that they use. And there's a whole number of legal controls over how lawyers have to practice their art. In design, we're almost like to some degree under a different kind of pressure to kind of deal with democratization. That every like our toolkit that was unique to us 10 years ago is now becoming either embedded in software, whether it's Figma or more and more AI, and that there's a general trend toward democratization. And does that sort of, it's becoming something open to everyone, change the equation a bit in terms of centralization within a large organization?
Um, I don't I don't see that it does, no. But there's a couple really exciting kind of learnings on this frontier. First of all, generally design teams often worry if the rest of the organization is taking design courses, and figuring out how to do wireframes or whatever. The learning there is that the more non-design background people learn about design, the more they respect someone who has a full career in design. So
Mm-hmm.
it's you definitely find people that are trying to be designers and say, I can do this on my own. Those are the people who don't even have any idea what they're missing. So it's almost it's super counterintuitive, but the more a design organization can teach engineering, product, business their design method, the more those other teams will ask for designers to represent that method rather than themselves moonlighting it.
And maybe it's because design, maybe relative to some areas like law or medicine, it's just newer, and we don't have the cultural history or experience of trying it ourselves and seeing, oh,
Right.
I get it now, and I get why you need someone who really knows what they're
It also
doing.
just seems more possible to try it yourself. Like you're not gonna wing it on law, you're not gonna wing it on being a dentist and advising on someone's teeth, but you might wing it on design. Um, I mean, the great news I would say, and for any of the viewers or the audience out there that are in organizations like this, if the organization has crossed over and has a lot of respect for design, they act like that. They say, "Hey, we're not actually not going to have this meeting without our research team as part of this meeting because what they bring to the table is so important. We would rather not have someone wing it." Um, it's pretty special.
Well, at the root of this all is expertise
Yeah.
and its half life and how you might acquire it and how it may be masked by jargon and kept close by a priesthood and whatnot, which might be a kind of weird segue to what you're doing now, because I think you're actually trying to really lean into making expertise more accessible, even if the expert's not in the room. So tell us what you're up to now that you are an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So yeah, I joined the ranks of you with all the experience of leading your own company all these years. It's something I always wanted to do. I've certainly been craving change, and so the transformations I led within the giant corporations have just, added to my hunger. But um, within each of those teams, as we were building up the talent, one of our favorite tricks was to ask more senior people to mentor or advise people who are aspiring to shift into their career field. A great example might be a UX designer who dreams of being a service designer, and the service designer would say, "Sure, I'll show you the ropes." Or one of my very favorite examples was a UX designer who wanted to be a visual designer and then wanted to code front end code. He just sat next to the person who was doing it. So this human to human transfer was something that we saw prove out in within our teams as by far the most exciting way to learn. And I would say books are a part of that. And it's
Good.
learning from someone that you admire is better than asking questions of Google or in today's day and age of ChatGPT. And the problem with learning from someone you admire is that that admired person usually is the most capacity constrained. So we all have someone we admire and we wish we were in touch with them right this moment for tips and tricks on how to do what we're doing. And there's a reason we're not in touch with them. It's because they're busy and their capacity is being spent on other things. So we, from a startup perspective, said, hey, maybe we can help with scaling the way experts share their knowledge by helping experts build a knowledge agent that can represent what they know for people who are learning at scale. And we tried it with a professor. We tried it then with an author. Then we tried it with a senior leader, and they all had, common themes, which are, yeah, I get a lot of the same questions.
Hmm.
And if I could just bottle up my answers to those questions and an AI agent could serve those answers on demand, it would be a win-win. So we just tried it, and prototype proved to blow our minds. Gen AI is a wonderful thing. Semantic search is a wonderful thing. Vector databases, which store kernels of knowledge rather than quotes,
Hmm.
which is the world we all come from. Kernels of knowledge can be reassembled with Gen AI, and the answer can be given in human language to match the context of the question, and the result is just mind-blowing. As I know you know, because you all have created Rosenbot, which is also a pretty great approach to knowledge sharing.
You managed to tell us so much about what your company's doing, except the name of the company.
So we named the company Tempt Me because so many people are tempted to ask questions but hold back. And we've named our flagship product, which is the ability to ask any expert any question. We've named that Answers from Me. And we've done that because we're oriented towards experts. And when experts want to share their knowledge, they can say, hey, if anyone needs answers from me, you can hit me up at answersfrom.me/Scott and ask me any question day or night, and you'll be learning from my unique knowledge.
So, what are you training, or what are your experts training their answers.me on? I mean, like you mentioned,
That's
authors,
the question. Yeah.
but what about a someone who's in a leadership role? What is their intellectual output that you're using?
Yeah, that's what's been really fun, a fun kind of problem space to play in, right? If we use design language, like how can we pull knowledge from a senior leader? Um, we just learned with leaders. So we designed with leaders. And they said, well, I'll tell you one place I drop a lot of knowledge is when I'm having one-on-one chats or when I'm in meetings where I'm sharing my perspectives. And in this modern age, we all know that there are AI note takers
Hmm.
aplenty right now. So we said, hey, maybe an AI note taker can capture, what Lou says in that meeting. And as he's dropping knowledge that might be answers to future questions from people, if we could capture that and put that into his agent's knowledge base, that would be pretty special. Turns out it's not as straightforward as grabbing a transcript and uploading it, right? Because at the beginning of any conversation, you may be talking about your mom's cookies, or you may be talking about something that's totally off topic that you don't want loaded as part of your knowledge. So we just needed to build a filtering algorithm that could identify the nuggets of knowledge. And then it's really important to anyone who's building a knowledge agent that they have control over what that knowledge agent knows. So we needed to put them in control over what it learns. If there's a AI note taker recording, be able to say, here's the nuggets of knowledge. Which ones do you want to approve? If you approve them, they'll go up to your knowledge base and they'll serve your audience moving forward. So
Which
that's a
actually
very
creates a nice
example.
feedback loop. So,
Yeah,
the agent is constantly getting smarter and learning new things along the way.
that's exactly right. Um, and then there's normal things like any senior leader will have done talks or may have written blog posts or may have maybe asking, hey, can I upload? I just gave some really great advice via email the other day. Can I send that to my AI agent's knowledge base? And so we just tackled those things, one after another for the experts that have been on our platform in our private beta. And just this summer, we moved from private beta to public, which is exciting. So now anyone can visit our website of answersfrom.me and give it a whirl.
It's interesting in terms of that that the intellectual output. There are going to be cases, I imagine, where it's really important to make clear the provenance of the content. In other words, this was I was interviewed in Forbes, and I'm going to upload that interview. And you want it to be clear that this was like a pretty big deal. It was an interview in Forbes. And then there was the email I sent to someone on my team where I was trying to help them do such and such. It's also really valuable information, but it's an email. Do I? It's to an individual. Are there ways that you're addressing to kind of de-emphasize provenance or citation, if you will, in certain cases, and emphasize it in others? And does your algorithm treat different kinds of content as more valuable or less so based on formality of publication?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. Yes. You may be surprised that from an expert perspective, they don't necessarily think that what they said to Forbes is more important than what they said, to a member of their team via email. But first of all, we do cite everything. So if someone asks a question and gets an answer, there'll be something in the bottom left that says, view sources, and you can see the sources of that answer. And maybe there were four sources, that all contributed to one answer, which is another pretty special thing about what's possible these days. But we may source Forbes, but we may also source that email. We wouldn't source it as it wouldn't be listed as email for our current answer to that one. We would just list it as expert knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And to answer your question about which one actually is more heavily weighted, we have something for experts that we call confirmed answers, where if you're loading expert knowledge or if you've purposely created a question and an answer that is nailing it, like it's exactly how you want to answer that, it would be a confirmed answer in your agent's knowledge base, and that would be more heavily weighted than random snippets of knowledge from all the other stuff that you've contributed.
Well, that means that somewhere deep down, at some level, there's some IA going on. So, that
Yeah, that's right.
makes people like me happy. Scott, I would love to talk more. And it's such an interesting arc from Disney to this kind of role of really kind of up-leveling large enterprises in terms of design and thinking about how design is positioned in those places to what you're doing now with AI and expertise and experts. But we're going to run out of time, and I got to make sure that you have an opportunity to give a gift to our listeners. What did you bring them?
Yeah, it relates to something I touched on a little bit earlier, which is helping others around you know more about design and research, is actually the best thing you can do. And there's a book that was published a few years back by some friends of mine at the Stanford D School, and it's called Idea Flow. it's a special book because it's really for the broader audience, and it really helps them gain confidence on creative brainstorming. And it also puts a lot of weight on it. I think Jeremy's quote is, "It's the only statistic that really matters at a company is how many new ideas the company has about where it can take the company in the future." The reason I would say that's an important book to grab onto is because it will empower anyone to help those around you feel confident doing more of what you do in a way that nets out in them respecting you more. And it's a beautiful thing. So check out that book. It's not dated like the authors feel like it might be. I think it's timeless. And I would say the more we can do in the design and research community to help others understand our methods, the more they'll respect and need us to be contributing those methods directly.
Once again, humility leads to harmony. Scott, that was a great conversation. Thank you for sharing with us. Thanks for joining us on the Rosenfeld Review.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks again. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the latest Rosenfeld Review. Really appreciate it. Before you go, I want to remind you that there's something you're going to want to check out if you haven't already. It is called the Rosenverse. Wonder how we came up with that name. It is your hub for all things UX and product design. It's a subscription platform with both free and premium options that has been trained and built on all the goodness that we've been putting out at Rosenfeld Media for years and years. So, what does that mean? It's a couple of Rosenverse live sessions every week that you can attend. It is hundreds of those recordings and hundreds of recordings from all of our conferences going back 10 years. And you may know that we do 4 conferences a year. It's also got this great chat bot called the Rosenbot that's trained on all of that, plus our 65 and growing collection of the best books out there on user experience. It's all there. There's some great discounts as well on books and workshops and our conference tickets. Check it all out. It's all there for you. It is waiting. It's there right now. And even if you have a free tier subscription, you're going to get incredible value from the Rosenverse and the Rosenbot. Go to rosenverse.rosenfeldmedia.com. Start it today.